right, Sergeant Major Baker, how you doing today?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I just I'll start off. I'm happy to be invited. I've watched your podcast for a
Thank you.
while now, and really appreciated the conversations you've had. You've had very smart people on, so
For sure.
I hope I'm up to that caliber because I was like, wow, these people know a lot.
No,
And
you're fine. I play the role of the dumb one, so
Yeah,
that's how
no,
I frame
it was
this.
it was good. So, yeah, I hope I live up to a little bit with that as far as where my background, where I come from. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I joined the army right before, well, pre 9/11. So the year before is when I came in. And yeah, I always like to give kind of like my story because it's I didn't come from a family of military, and in fact, this was not kind of one of those routes that was really pushed upon me growing up. I always, like any kid, I guess, I was, Gen X, so A Team and all the Vietnam movies came about as I was getting close to middle school. So you think Platoon and Full Metal Jacket and my stepfather growing up was a Vietnam vet, and I mean, I, I was I was like really into just learning everything about the Vietnam War. Like I had there was a comic book called The Nam. I don't know if you ever heard of it. So it was an
Mhm.
entire comic book series all on Vietnam. I had like
Interesting.
every issue of it. Um, and I would just consume books about the war, and I loved it. I just loved learning about it, and it was so interesting to me. But I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. My mom is Jehovah's Witness, so that is not, I mean, so that is in direct conflict with everything that I'm learning in my religion and in my household. It's like that is, like I said, it's not encouraged at all. Um,
Mhm.
but I remember kind of being inclined as a young kid, like, oh man, if I was going to do it, I'm gonna be a Marine because I thought like that must be like the toughest thing to do. So this is like probably fifth, sixth grade, right? I had all those kind of fantasies about that, and um, so there was definitely something in there in me that was already, like I was I had an interest in the military and everything, but it was not encouraged at all. I mean, in fact, it was discouraged
I
to the
bet.
point that as I got through high school, that became more of it became less of that was where I was going to go. And I was focused on you know becoming a Jehovah's Witness and all of that, and it's a totally different lifestyle and growing up in that religion. So, um, long story on that is I went to community college. I had no direction on what I wanted to do. Uh, and so I was kind of just I thought I had a direction, but it really wasn't what I was into. So I went and tried to get in the nursing program at my local community college. I thought that would give me kind of flexibility in a schedule, but I really wanted to do like trauma stuff, right? So I was like, oh man, I got to get in this. So I got to the point of like getting into practicals, and I went to like my first few like 12, or I don't know if it was at the time, I can't remember back. It seemed like it was 24-hour shifts, but it might have just been like an overnight 12-hour shift or something. But it was
Sure.
overnight, and this is in Arizona, and so you have a large, at the time, especially like retirement community in the town that I would lived in, and so it was just old people. Like my entire experience at the emergency room was just dealing with like old, sick, just like it wasn't trauma, it wasn't anything like that. It was, you know, I was like, this is not for me as a 18, 19-year old kid. I just didn't have the mentality for that. I was like, if this is what I'm gonna, so I got, I at that point I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. but I got into photography and I got into the music scene. And so me and my friend, we built a website. This is like 96 ish. And
Geez,
yeah, like
back in the day.
very early. We built a website. I bought regular film cameras. We went to shows. I would print my film, and then I would have to take my film, get it printed, and then pay for a photo disc, a Kodak photo disc, to be able to get the photos. And so I was working at the time, doing just regular restaurant serving jobs, whatever, and busing and stuff. So paying my way through school, living at home, and had this side thing of like, oh, we're gonna build this website. And actually, it actually became semi successful in our little local music scene, and people would kind of look to it. And by the time we ended it, we were getting sent demo tapes from people like, hey, listen to our stuff and write a review. And so I was writing. I got to the point where I started writing. We started interviewing bands. We would go to shows. We would, afterward, and we'd write and post it on the thing. So really got into that. It was basically I was doing photojournalism. And so once I got down that road, and I figured out, okay, I want to do this. I want to be a photojournalist. But it was like, how do I pay for this? I've already been like, this is now like, you're talking like 4 or 5 years of like out of high school. Now I'm just paying for a community college just to access the darkroom. So I can make my prints, build a portfolio, because I figured out I got to build a portfolio so I can go to art school. And so that's where I was really kind of focused. I was entering, I was in local art show, like my community college art show. I made that and got recognized, and so I was like, okay, this might be something for me. I really got into during that time. There's a National Geographic photographer, and he has his own photography organization called VII. That's James Noctway. Really, probably one of the best. Like as far as you talk about artistic abilities with his photos, just he combined photojournalism with like the art aspect of it, and I was just like, okay, that's what I got to do. I got to go. I got to be I got to be like James Noctway. How do I do this and then just go places that are things that are happening? Like I can go down to Colombia and photograph everything that's happened with the FARC. I could go into Brazil and the favelas and like this is like 1998, 99. So I was like focused. That's where I'm going to be. And so later on that year, I got a call out of the blue from a recruiter. And so this is, I'm a punk rock kid thinking I'm going to, go off and do this war stuff. And he calls me and it was like early in the morning. By this time I'm a bartender and I'm working late and doing all the things that bartenders and people. So waking up, I'd wake up at like 12 maybe. So kind of woke me up and I was like, okay, what is this? Who's calling me? And he's like, hey, this is Sergeant First Class Janata. Okay. I'm like, how did you get my number? We got it from the community college. And just wondered, what are you trying to do? What's your plan? What do you want to do? And it was like this. I was like, I don't know. I'm trying to get an answer. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out my way. I mean, this is what I want to do. I was like, I want to be a photojournalist. I want to go to art school, and San Francisco Art Institute had started this documentary photography program, and I was like, it's going to cost like $50,000. It was like crazy amount of money, and living in San Francisco, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And he's like, hey, what if I told you could do that in the Army? And I was like, I think you're lying to me. I think you're lying to me. He's like, no, I'm serious. Like, come down, check it out. What do you say? Check it out. All right, fine. I'll call your bluff. I got nothing to do. I'll go down and check it out. And so went down. He popped in the VHS tape, showed me a tape of like this. It was Comcam guys, and they were flying around in helicopters. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? How do I sign up? Like, it was just instantaneous. I'm like, I want to jump out of planes. I want to take photos. I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to do. He's like, it's 5 years, and I'm like, okay, fine, 5 years. I can pay off all my credit card bills that I had already racked up because I've been trying to pay my way through school and and all of that. And I get a GI Bill, and I was like, yeah, this is for me. This is what I'm going to do. And at the time, I'm 24 years old. Um, so I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I
And this was still pre 9/11, correct?
This is 2000, so this is
Okay, got
summer
it.
summer
Got it.
2000. I mean, it was like the next day. I'm like, okay. He's like, well, you got to, hey, take this pre-ASVAB, and like these kind of jobs are hard to get, blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, take the pre-ASVAB. He's like, oh, man, if you take the ASVAB like this, no problem. You're good. You can get whatever you want. So that's what it was. I went in. I went in the next day, and I mean, I think my ASVAB day too. I was probably hungover, and I took that. But I did okay. I did well enough. I mean, my line scores were high enough that I came back. My problem was, I was underweight. I mean, I'm not a big guy. I'm a small guy. I've always been small, and so I had to gain weight to get in. So good thing I was in like 6 month depth program because I had to actually pack on. I was I worked at the Olive Garden as a bartender, so I would
Mhm.
every day I would order the Alfredo dipping
Oh
sauce.
yeah.
It was
Yep.
breadsticks, so I was just jamming breadsticks and Alfredo sauce.
Gotta load up.
We had like one of the shake machine, so I brought my protein in every day, and I would just make myself a shake every day. And so I gained enough that I got over the limit. And I made it in, and when I weighed in, to ship out, so that was good. But yeah, it was uphill climb. You know, uh, uh, I didn't work out. I wasn't that wasn't my thing. Um, so I definitely had to get into shape. I started doing push-ups and everything, but even getting in basic training, it was like I wasn't the guy who came in and just killed PT, right? So had to kind of work up to that. Even in AIT, I just couldn't pass my sit-ups for some reason. I just couldn't do it.
Mhm.
But I really wanted to go to airborne school. I didn't get airborne in my contract. When I got to AIT, um, they the drill sergeant there was like just came from the 82nd, came from the unit that I actually would go to, which would be the 49th Public Affairs Detachment, which was the Public Affairs Detachment assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division. And he was the NCOIC, and then he became drill sergeant, AIT drill sergeant after that. And so he was just pushing, hey, go to Bragg, go to Bragg. If you want to go airborne, we'll get you volunteer. I'm like, sweet, that's what I want. Because when I did sign up and I said I wanted to go, they were like, they told me, my recruiter told me, oh, they don't have that for your job. I was like, what? What do you mean? I was like, you showed me the pictures, you showed me the video. Oh, no, they don't have that for you. You just have to, when you get to your unit, you have to ask them and all that. I was like, okay, well, whatever. But when I got to AIT, turns out that, yeah, so I signed my volunteer statement right away. Had to work myself up on PT and to get good on that. And I was all set. So going to the 82nd. But yeah, I was once I was in the army, I was like completely focused on I'm going to go wherever, volunteer for whatever is going to get me first out the door. The first one to be involved in whatever's going on. That was my mindset, and it was the right mindset because I ended up being at the right place at the right time when GWAT kicked off. So yeah,
Soon after.
yeah, it was kind of fast and furious, but it was just it's funny looking back. Like uh, at that point in my life, being 24 years old, kind of like floundering, not really kind of figuring, I took I became EMT certified. I went and took, studio music recording. I took like all kinds of stuff. So I was just taking classes. But once I've kind of like committed that this is what I really want to do, and I was focused, that's what I was driven for that. But it's going back, yeah, like right before I signed my contract, the like recruiting battalion commander, we went. They had like a bunch of the recruits out for a baseball game, for a Diamondbacks game, and he's going through meeting everybody. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And I told him what I wanted to do, and he's like, "Oh, that's hard to get, but keep your options open." And I was like, "There isn't any other options." I was like, "I mean, if you don't have that job, then I'm not going to another job. I'm not." Like I was focused on that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a photojournalist. This is really what I want to do. I'm 24 years old. I'm not trying to find myself anymore. Like I'm pretty set on this is what I was meant to do. So yeah, it worked out. I got it. But yeah, I got to the 49th pad, and I was focused on that too. Like I had me and my roommate. So a good buddy of mine. He's also a public affairs sergeant major. He's out in Europe right now. He's the AFN Europe sergeant major. Um,
Hmm.
so he's out there, and yeah, he and I, we came in together. We were at AIT. He was like 2 weeks behind me. Both went to Fort Jackson. He was 2 weeks behind me in the sister battalion, and we get to AIT and 2 weeks apart, different classes. Um, I was a little bit delayed, trying to get my PET up and everything. So he finished class and actually went to airborne school like a week ahead of me. So when we got to airborne school, and then we were both at airborne school a week apart, and which was cool. Like we'd link up, and we both knew we were going to brag. And we had another friend too, and he and I were in airborne school together at the same time. So all three of us knew we were going to brag. Um, it was so like I was so focused on it. It's so funny, like as a PFC, but like
Yeah.
um, I was like, I'm going to go to the 82nd, right? And so I knew that Kosterman was um, like taking the recruiting time at home. So I said, I'm only taking a week of leave. I'm going straight home. I gotta like update my license and get my car and the rest of my stuff that's left in my house, and I'm driving straight back to North Carolina. So it was like, so I flew in back to Arizona, got my car, drove straight out, and because I was trying to beat Kosterman so I could sign in, so I could get to the 82nd. I don't know why I thought like I'm gonna have any control over like where I went, but I did.
You're just trying to will it into existence.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, I'm gonna beat them there so that I get there first, and then they're gonna sign me to the 49th pad. We ended up getting to the to brag on the same day. Like I pull up, I'm getting out. All of a sudden, I see him walking around the corner. I was like, oh man, how do you? I thought I had timed out. And he's like, hey, what's going on? So turns out the week later, he gets sent to 82nd, and he's like we're there for a few days. He gets his orders to 82nd. He's like, hey, can't you give the orders to this guy? He really wants to go. I don't care. I'll go to Corps. I'll go wherever. I'm like, I'm not going to Corps. I'm not going to Garrison. I don't want to go to Garrison. And so I was like, I'm going to 82nd. And he's like, no. They're like, no, shut up, private. Get on the bus. You're going to 82nd. And so I was like, damn, I'm going to Corps or wherever. And then I get my call like, nope, you're going to 82nd too. So I'm a week behind him. But the day I report to the 82nd is 9/11. So that day, like it was,
Wow.
yeah, it was 9/11 that day. Like it was I they're like, hey, not tomorrow morning, grab all your duffel bags, come over, report to the day room. You guys are gonna get on the bus and go over to 82nd replacement. So that morning, I'm grabbing my duffel bags and after PT and walking to the room to report in. And I pass this guy on the sidewalk, and he's like, hey man, did you hear? I'm like, no. He's like, plane flew into the World Trade Center. And I was like, oh, yeah. I had just been to the World Trade Center, to Manhattan that summer. It
Mhm.
was like Memorial weekend of AIT. So I was out of AIT. I finished AIT and we went down there. So I remember seeing, I was thinking in my head, like a prop plane, like a tourist plane flying through or whatever. He's like, no, like a full on like 747 or something. And I was like, oh, I was like, dude, that's not an accident. I'm like,
Yeah, no way.
I was like, that's an attack, man. That just doesn't happen.
Right.
And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah. And then, we second plane, and I was like, holy shit, man, this is crazy. So it was like it for everyone, it was an insane day, right? I mean, you never forget where you were. You never forget what happened that day, what was
Mhm.
going on. But it was just like I was right where I was supposed to be at the time I was supposed to be there. So yeah, so it was crazy. It was chaos. Everybody, even in the 82nd replacement day room, like I remember the first sergeant, the commander, everybody. I get to replacement, but everything was just kind of at a standstill. Everybody's like, "What do we do?" And
Right.
everybody was just watching TV all day. Um, and it was kind of weird because you got this is pre 9/11, right? So people joined for all kinds of different reasons, and um, there was there was some people freaking out. There were some people like, yeah, like let's go get him, let's go kill him, and some
Right.
people freaking out like, oh my god, I'm gonna get sent to war, right? And
Well, right, because we didn't know you didn't know how big it was, who it was. I mean, for
right,
all we
we didn't
knew, it
know,
was,
we had no, nobody had any
yeah,
clue. You just knew something was gonna happen. Everything had
right,
changed, and it's real now.
right,
And
right.
so I found Kosterman, and that day, that afternoon, because he was a week ahead of me, so he was actually like going to the unit, um, because he'd finished his in processing and everything at the replacement, and so the N2IC is coming to pick him up, and he comes and he meets up with us, and the N2IC that we had at the time, he's like, hey, we already have like a standby, or like we've already got like a voco that we got to be ready. We don't know where we're going. At the time, it could have been just to go up to New York City to help provide public affairs support for whatever disaster relief or anything like that, right? We were just basically on
Mhm.
call. We didn't know, are we going downrange to somewhere where we don't know, or are we going up there? I think at first it was probably more likely that we were going to go to like New York City and help kind of a recovery and military support to civil authorities kind of thing, because I think that the unit was already on that mission for FORSCOM. For like every summer, they put like units on call for force fires and all that kind of stuff, and so I think they were on call for that. But that immediately got switched once there was actually a deployment that was going to happen. So yeah, it was just funny to go back and like no, really, I'm going somewhere. I'm like the post of all these guys. I'm not an infantry guy, and I'm in the organization that actually is going to go somewhere. All these 82nd paratrooper, young paratroopers aren't going anywhere, right off the bat. So it was kind of funny to see them all nervous and spun up, and it was like, oh man, I'm actually like the one that's going to have to go somewhere and do something. Um,
Right.
yeah, so it was a crazy time. But yeah, we actually did deploy um, within about 3 weeks. We once we got the call, like so I the NCO at the time, he was like, hey, you might have to catch up with us if we deploy early or whatever. Like we didn't know how quick it was going to be. The 82nd, was always ready to go. So it was one of those things, 18 hours or less, we can go. So once we got the call, we actually did, we went through drills of like loading up our stuff and everything, because we knew we were on call. And so by the time we got that, we were able to like get all of our stuff, move, but it was still a process. It was kind of crazy. We loaded up 2 trucks, 2 trailers, had all of our gear. And we had to like put it on trucks, and like they moved all our stuff up to Norfolk to like send us back down to Charleston to finally get on another C-17 that flew us into theater. But I remember when we got told like where we're going, it was like, hey, you're going to Uzbekistan. And you're like, Uzbekistan? I have no idea. Like, I guess it's somewhere over Afghanistan, right? So you're looking at maps or reading the CIA or the State Department like country book, basically the fact sheets on, oh, okay, I don't even know anything about this country, and but yeah, so we went to K2 and we were there with Task Force Dagger North, and um, we're there at the beginning of the whole thing, like, so the whole story of the horde soldiers, all of that, I was there at least to be able to witness it from afar. We were there, but they didn't know what to do with us, So it's really been interesting to see the transition within the military to really understand the importance and the role of public affairs
Right.
um, at the time, especially for SOF. Like we were like, they threw us there, but they were like, okay, uh, you're not going to cover anything. You're not going to see anything. Who has TS clearances? Like
Mhm.
okay, like every photo you take is going to be classified, and where are you going to release it to and to who? And it was just this whole thing. They had no doctrine or precedent for how they work with public affairs at the time. Especially it's coming off the back end of everything that happened in Somalia with special operations, and kind of how things worked in the media with that. So I mean, there was like a huge reluctance, right, on anything being reported about SOF. So, but they were the main effort. That's another weird thing, right? I mean, at the time, like,
Right.
that's not a that's not common for special operations to be put into the role of the main effort. They're usually the supporting, they're going to be the supporting effort, to a conventional fight. So for it to be the lead effort for what we were doing in response to the attacks, it changed the dynamic for, hey, you don't have the option now to stay out of the limelight. Like, there has to
Right.
be, like, we have a responsibility. The military have a responsibility to report to the American people what we're doing. And so it was really, kind of figuring out, breaking new ground on that whole concept. So it was interesting to see that, right? I'm a PFC. I'm just like, hey, send me somewhere where I could take some photos of something and write a story. I'm not in the conversations. I think I'm old enough and mature enough to kind of pick up things and kind of understand it, and be aware of it. But being so new to the military and everything else, and not really understanding the dynamic, right, of what that was about. Fortunately for us, we uh, we had SOCOM sent the basically who I am now, sent the public affairs sergeant major forward to kind of like give oversight, to kind of walk us through things. He had the credibility that, and trust that my captain and the E6, they weren't going to have, right. I mean, and they were both very capable and smart people, but they had no soft experience. They were going to apply a conventional, mindset, and they weren't trusted. And that's the biggest thing with soft, is being trusted, right? Being part of the team. They're so close and tight knit on the team, and they're focused on teams, right? So anything that kind of takes away from that, you kind of got to build the trust to be able to get in the fold. And so it was hard from that outset. So have um, the sergeant major come in and have that ability to kind of break through the organization, to be able to say, hey, this is how we think we can do this. This is what's being asked, and he had more authority coming from SOCOM than we did, as just this unit from FORCECOM that was attached to the task force, right?
Right.
So we covered a bunch of stuff on K2, Karshikahanabad, and did little base stories. We had a newsletter. I wrote like opinion pieces, little editorials and stuff for our little newsletter that we printed on the printer in the jock. But we eventually did. We were some of the first on the ground in Bagram, so set up Bagram. Like legit, 300 people were on the ground when we got to Bagram. Um, so we we actually established our media operations center in the big hangar. There was, if you were ever at Bagram, the main Disney Drive, the main road that went up and down, and so there was two big hangars. That hangar actually eventually got taken down, but there was two big hangars. One, the hangar we took over, and then an adjacent hangar to it. Actually, they built that into a uh, into the EPW facility, which is kind of funny.
Oh, right. Yep, I remember. I was there for a while, so I remember that one.
Yeah, so just think about that. We established our mock, and then the MPs come in and they're like, "Hey, we got to build a EPW camp," and they're like, "Hey, this is where we're gonna put it," and it was like, "We're putting a mock here, like a media operations center. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like we're trying to bring media in here, but we need space, whatever. Like screw it, or we're putting it here." So it was really like, okay, this doesn't work for us, but we set it up there, and we had some media come through, and those initial like engagements, and so my boss, the commander, we actually linked in with a UK public affairs officer, um, two public affairs officers from the UK, had them through, and so we facilitated those initial media engagements. Um, and then we held like some big initial VIP things during that time. The So Hamid Karzai coming through, Don Rumsfeld. We had like a Senate visit with John McCain and everything. So all these people coming through, and it was definitely like pretty cool. Like, so if you there's pictures from that time, and they're actually you can see 49th pad, because we built like a little area where they can meet, and one of the tables is like a one of our camera cases, but it's like a big box, and so on it says 49th pad, and you see Hamid Karzai and Don Rumsfeld sitting around our equipment in this hangar. But yeah, it was it was different. Definitely can't say I wasn't in any kind of danger. I mean, we were pretty at that point. It was the everything was pretty secure around Bagram.
Right.
My my NCOIC and or my NCO at the time, and my commander and everything, they were there when they rose took the flag up on the embassy. So when they reopened the embassy, and um, yeah, we had a team come in, and they flew in NYPD and FYD FDNY members. So this is early. This is like December of 2001. They flew them from New York, and they brought pieces of the World Trade Center, and we like buried it in the ground. So we got pictures of that. Yeah, it was an interesting time. It was just cool to be around that, right? And everything happened
Mhm.
so fast. Like,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it was a completely it's kind of funny that you joined a non-wartime army, and then right after it became a wartime army for the next 20 years. And yeah, obviously it's GWAT, so it's not like high intensity, but
yeah,
still very different. When I joined, I won't even tell you when I actually got in, because it was a while after that. I was definitely a youngin' when 9/11 happened, but for us it was like, okay, there's two wars going on, so a lot of my generation joined with the intent of going to. I know I was the dumb 16-year-old who was like, "Oh, it's badass. I want to get shot at. That's great."
Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
that's that stupid line that we all have when we're young, and then when you actually do encounter something like that, you don't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
But
It's
you you had been, and even at Bagram, like Bagram's a crazy example because when I was in Bagram, it was essentially a city, just a mini city.
mm,
It was pretty chill. We had mortars and rocket fire, but beyond that, it was garrison, just a giant garrison, not that much different than what you see back home. And it's an interesting place, that's for sure. But I was curious at the EPW camp that you mentioned.
mhm.
Was the prison there was a prison there, and I thought it was outside the base, but it was like right outside the base. Was that active at the time? Do you
No, no,
recall?
no, 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 no. Like I said, this is like
So
a,
new building though. It didn't exist previously. That prison was built
yeah,
for.
this
Got
thing
it.
was they
Okay.
just commandeered took over one of the hangars. So it was just the
Got it.
hangar that was there,
Okay.
big hangar, and it just had enough space, right, to be able to put a
Right.
bunch of open cages, if you will,
Right.
to build the
Yeah.
detainee facility there. But I mean, we were watching, night after night, uh, hundreds of Taliban rolling into like basically our backyard, like right out by our shitters, right up behind our so out by the flight line. There was a big like open flat area, and they would bring them in. They had concertina wire, and they would like kind of serpentine them through as they were checking them and in processing them all. And they were bringing trucks in, or they would fly in from different parts of Afghanistan. The MPs would, and then they would bring in like trucks of these um, Taliban. That they were pulling, out of the mountains there. And yeah, that was wild to kind of witness that too, because some of these were like straight up Al Qaeda. I think I think some of the people that they brought in were the initial like um, were close ties to some of Bin Laden and everything. So it was like there were people around that were part of other organizations that were questioning them and yeah. So you know definitely like and like I said, it wasn't controlled anything, like it was just kind of everything was open because there was nobody around, right? There was a platoon of 10th Mountain, an MP platoon, the 49th pad, so it was 8-man public affairs attachment, and that's it in those two buildings. And um you had fifth group and their elements that came down and set up in Pogram, and they were down the road from us. And they called that, they had like a little couple buildings down there that they used for that, for everything that they had down there. And then the UK was down further from that, where there was like a little air tower kind of thing. Um, and they set up near there. And then so the Air Force was there as well to set up, operations for their airfield, but there was nobody there. So like I said, when they're bringing them through and they're questioning them, they were like questioning these top level Al Qaeda personnel, like in the floor below where we had our public affairs operation going. Like you would never see that, right? I mean, like there's no way we should be this close to whatever that is, right? Like, um, yeah, I mean, they were so short too. It was only that platoon. So if they left, half the platoon was gone over there. We actually pulled shifts because they were like, hey, we just don't have enough to, we're trying to pull these shifts, and we're like have people traveling out to go pick up all these EPWs that are coming in. So we actually did have to pull shifts. It wasn't really anything like there were another body to like kind of watch, like, hey, you're going to watch this cage of these 10 people, and here's your instructions, and so we were like doing extra duty for support for them. And you got a couple privates, have them come over and just pull guard and watch these guys. It was kind of weird.
Yeah. No question. Well, I'm kind of curious. Like, do you think? Because I mean, let's be real. We've had 20 plus years of the global war and terror, which is done, right, more or less, for better or for worse, maybe in some capacity. But me personally, I think it's only good. But obviously, the public affairs game, I imagine, is going to be very, very different soon because God forbid that we are in a near peer conflict in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I'm just kind of curious, like how you, from your perspective, how things would change because I imagine access to certain locations and what you're allowed to release on camera will be very different in a fight against a nation that could reach back further and actually impact things, whereas the Taliban couldn't really do that. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious how you see the future. Let's say the next 10 years looking from that perspective, and maybe it's the same. I don't know, but
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
I'm. It is. You know, there's been a lot of doctrine written in the last couple years now, kind of trying to update and get ahead of this because we are understanding we're coming out of 20 years GWAT, um, and so dealing with the near peer and all that it brings, along with the changes in technology, but understanding like the power of information, right? And the importance of narratives and keeping that. So it's just going to be a continual uh, balance between security and, but even more so than it's ever been, right? I mean, like there would because and what makes it more difficult is that it felt, in the past you could really kind of clamp down and control um, information, right? As far as deployment timelines and movement and all this, right? Now there's so much open source out there and so much so it's like planners and everybody just has to have to be cognizant of the fact that's now just an inherent risk that we almost can't mitigate, right? So like it always puts us as public affairs in kind of an awkward position where we have to um, kind of deny not deny but can't verify the obvious, right? As to not release not violate OPSEC. And so I think that you're going to see just more of that. And so how do we get to a point where we can move these big scale movements? And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot more of what we've been doing, which is we have to be postures, right, for the response that we think we're going to have to do. To we're going to have to like think 2 or 3 steps ahead to already have things in place that you're not going to have as big of movements because we just know like there's no way we can conceal those type of movements when you talk about large scale, right? So there's going to have to ways to defend against it, and the public affairs role is just we're going to have to balance and look at like based on the risk that's there to say, hey, this is already known, or like what role and responsibility do we have to report, hey, we're doing this thing. You're going to see probably just a tightening, like this is what I've seen over even since COVID is this real um strict tightening of the flow of information. Like if you look at what's going on in Europe right now and everything, right? And you're aware, you like me watch, your X feed, and you see the reporters like, oh, we don't have access to Europe, we don't have that, and even during COVID, I saw it. It was like everything gets funneled to the NSC for good or bad, right? To like control, like, hey, this is what we're going to say, and this is what we're not going to say. To where you kind of saw it like a little bit more open during GWAT, where it was everybody was given a little bit more leeway to be able to just, hey, we got, and even our structure within the army was pushed down to like the brigade level, right? We had brigade combat teams. They kind of operated as their own little thing, and they had their own PAO, and everything was channeled through, right? But now you're just gonna see more of a stovepiping, just because everybody just sees how important that controlling that message is, and I think you're just going to see a tightening of that, and that's what I've seen over the last like few years is just everything, almost everything's got to be pushed up to the highest level. And sometimes it's not even on that organization to be able to really, it's got to come from the podium. And we talk, when I say the podium, I mean like OSD spokesperson or NSC, right? I mean, that's where you're going to see like that kind of stuff get pushed out. It doesn't mean that the the elements below that aren't doing work, right? Like they're not like it just means that the message is kind of just there's more of a control on it, and that's what I've seen. But I mean, there's a whole other side to like when you talk about then once you get into theater and you start doing things like, I mean, yeah, those are the problem sets we're trying to work through, right? Like, um, how do you if you're in an environment that's got restrictions on comms and everything, and how do you flow and move information, right? Um, and the things that we're doing even now, especially in the Pacific, with our different exercises and things like that, we're working through those issues now. And it's not in a contested environment, but at least just for the dealing with the scope of and scale and the size of the theater, right, is a problem set on its own. And then you know finding bandwidth and having the right comms in place. When you're now in the southern hemisphere and you're trying to find a commercial satellite that you can move imagery on or whatever, and do we have that piece of kit, and or is there cell phone things we can tap into, and do we want to, is that secure enough, or is that compromised because the Chinese set up everything down there or whatever, right? I mean, there's all these different layers to that. And then yeah, if you were in actually contested environment, you might even have that, ability, right? But the flow of information is going to be so critical at that point. We're going to need to be able to figure that out, because we have to be able to release information um, at near real time. But it's going to have to be protected. It's going to, I mean, so there's some real challenges on the information side that we're figuring out, but I don't think we're there yet. I think like
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah, no, one of the things that concerns or scares the hell out of me personally is just AI and the fact that AI generated images and news travels so fast.
yeah
So I'm imagining a scenario where, again, God forbid, because I don't want a war with China. I'm sure you don't either. But like, imagine a war is taking place down there, and the disinformation campaigns are going to be absolutely insane. So you and I'm sure your peers, your full time job, depending on how things went, would not be putting out information. It would be just shooting down fake information, which isn't helpful. I mean, it is helpful. Don't get me wrong, it's helpful, but you should also be doing other things. But instead, we're just tackling a wall of disinformation that's coming from, again, AI generated articles and
yeah
videos. I mean, again, whole videos of you and I talking can be made now. It's crazy.
yeah
And I'm thinking like a scenario where China says that they captured a special forces team in some location somewhere, but in order for you to counteract that, you have to say where they were the entire time and actually, you know what I'm saying, and actually prove it.
yeah
Or you don't have to prove it, but with the way the internet is now, with people just accepting everything that they read, it's almost still too late. So it's just, I don't know. You got your work cut out for you.
yeah
Is the only way I would say it, but it's concerning to me.
I think when you talk about this, sort of like the disinformation,
Right.
and in that scenario, uh, I think it's really going to come down to um, we have to maintain and establish credibility and trust from the beginning. That um, so that no matter what they put out, like unless a reporter hears it from us, they're just going to deny it. Now, are there going to be audiences out there that just take it full on and just believe it? Sure. I mean, we see it every day. People believe in just the stupidest stuff, right? Or just some random person posting whatever it is, right? Arma 3 content of, hey, this thing That's bullshit. It's like made up, right? But people believe it. And so it will come to like, do we have to address every single thing? No. Um, but also on their side, they're like, well, I don't need you to believe everything. I just need to cause enough doubt, right? In your audience so that they question everything you're saying, right? I mean, but I don't, the tactic won't be to go after every single one. And even in the doctrine, like that's the way we kind of rate, right? It's written now too, is that we don't have to go after every single thing, but we definitely have to be clear about what we're reporting that is true, and that we have the trusted source, right? And so everything, I always tell people like, we got to frame it in that, public affairs, our center of gravity is credibility. Our center of gravity is trust. We cannot do anything. So from, just taking the operational, um, terminology and applying it to public affairs, like that is for us. Like we cannot lose that. And everything needs to be focused on how do we maintain that and how do we not put that at risk. Um, and so that's critical for us. And because I think when it comes to that time, then like you said, yeah, th- they got to be looking at that. The media and whoever else out there has to look at that and understand the sources coming from, and then hopefully we put ourselves in a position that we can at least um, have the public know that, hey, if they don't hear it from us or they don't hear it corroborated from our side, then it's probably not true. And that's kind of how we have to like frame it. But yes, I think that there's also things that we have to do in um, to set the field for us to be able to do that, right? And some of that might be, revealing just enough to say, hey, we don't have people operating in that area, right? Like, so looking for ways that we can say we don't have anybody operating in that area, and so there was nobody that could be captured, right? Or those kinds of things, right? So if you hear this thing, like, yeah, it's garbage. It's not true, right? And I think that's how you kind of do it. Is we develop enough context of what's happening so that people can kind of hopefully figure out, or at least use their judgment based on what they know, the context we've provided them of what's going on operationally, enough that it's not giving up anything OPSEC wise, but at least they can discern, like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense because we know what the US said, they're operating in this area or they're doing this or they have these type of units doing X, Y, and Z, right? And they're not there. Um, there's going to be things, of course, right, that we have to that we never let the public know about, because of security and risk and all that. But it's always balancing that. That's always the balancing act we play in public affairs is the OPSEC thing
That's
and figuring that out.
that's probably the balance that the public least understands, is that you need secrecy sometimes.
Yeah,
Like you Yeah, we're a republic and we're, like, for example, like, one of the most common is when they claim that 600 NATO soldiers are killed in some far off conflict somewhere that, obviously there weren't, because it's really hard to hide something like that here.
yeah,
If a soldier dies, you're going to hear about it. It's not something we can just hide.
yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, you're right. Sometimes things just run wild, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, and is it worth us or worth the time to kind of battle that? I think the other piece to this too is, and this is what I've seen play out online over time, but is that kind of like we need we need more people from the outside to just understand common sense, right? To kind of chime in and kind of like address the craziness, that people will say. So looking at our veteran community and things like that, who can advocate and just say, hey, this is wrong. This just wouldn't happen this way or whatever, right? Even if they don't have any kind of awareness, but how would you empower those type of groups to be able to do that? Because I think there's more credibility in that kind of dialogue than even it coming from an official source a lot of time. Um, and so, uh, but that's also like, when you look at kind of the adversaries' attack on our society, as far as like amplifying any kind of divisions within us. I think that's part of that, right? Is that, if you create enough divisions within that society, then you're not going to have all the advocates, right? You're going to have a lot of people who are just going to be naysayers. And our society is kind of just prone to that, being as democratic and free as we are, that they can kind of exploit that. But I think at a certain point, at a certain level as a society, we probably have to come together enough to be able to say, hey, look, you know, yeah, we got to come together with Team USA on some of these things, and understand that there are good guys and bad guys, right? I mean, as simple as that might seem, right? I but um, I think it's important, for us to understand, like, that there isn't this big evil, cabal that is running everything and is I just
The lizard people on the moon,
yeah,
you're
there's
saying.
people are delusional about it, and I mean, like, I don't understand to what end, does that serve you to hold up
Right,
the worldview.
right.
Yeah, okay, I'm sure that someone is out there. Oh, he's been spent 24 years in the government, but yeah, I've spent 24 years in the government. I haven't seen anything like that, like, right?
Yeah,
And have been the fly on the wall on very high levels to know, like, no, that these are just regular people trying to do the right thing. I haven't, you know, being, like I said, being in the room with presidents and secretaries of defense, and and being on calls where people like that at those levels are talking. They're just regular people who are trying to, like, figure this thing out and trying to do the best they can with what we're trying to do as a country. You know, so uh,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, so I think, like, just having people, you know, having someone be able to talk to their neighbor, talk to their relative, who might be confused about it, goes a lot further than, the official account, saying, "Hey,
right.
that's wrong."
Yeah, no, yeah, no, I think you make a great point about just really everything. I get my last well, one of my last questions here is, so obviously we have a recruiting issue, in our military. I'm sure others. I personally have the opinion that that's cyclical anyway. That we've always had ups and downs in recruiting, and we're wrapping up GWAT, so there's not a whole lot of rah rah stuff going on right now.
Mm,
But I'm kind of curious. Like, you made a good point that you wanted to be a photojournalist, you want to do photography, and that's like one of those things that not many people would realize you can do in the military.
yep,
It's not a it's not like a it's not if if you're, let's say you come from a background that you are a pacifist, or you are you want to stay away from combat. That is something that you can do, and it also follows you later in life that you can easily jump to the civilian world with those skill sets. So one, I guess I just wanted to get your opinion on, what, in your opinion, humble opinion, what's the best way to tackle the recruiting crisis? Is it a communication thing? Is it a incentive thing? Or is there something more at play? And then I guess secondary is any words of wisdom. Let's say it's, a young kid listens to this for whatever reason, is interested in the military, wants to hear from guys like you and I and the others. I guess what advice would you give, someone who is starting right now and might be looking into that as a career?
yeah. So recruiting, you know, you're right. It might be a cyclical thing. I also think it's just we need to address maybe some of the our societal change, right? I mean, like, we have a generation's change. I mean, there's just like there isn't. I mean, this is my outside looking in, is just there isn't the same. And I can't say like I joined in like beating my chest like go USA, right? I wasn't. That wasn't me. I was definitely doing it for an ulterior motive, right? Like to get access to training, to get education, right? And then it kind of I understood what service meant. I saw it, and I built appreciation for it. So I think maybe, yeah, like doing that, it works for some people, right? Say pull on the service and the patriotism, but um some ways, it might just be the opportunities, right? And like how do we show that, and paint the picture that there isn't like all this negative, it isn't this thing that can turn into, it's going to break you, right? Or break people, or whatever, right? I mean, or that you're going to be sent off to fight for the military industrial complex, and for oil, and for big business, and all these kinds of things, right? There's a lot of narratives out there that are counter to those things, when hey, um the military exists, it's not going anywhere, right? And it provides a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So I think like comes back to like what I was saying. It really comes down to us in the veteran community, us who are still in, um, to kind of project, in a way, the positives that are out there. I'll tell you, 'cause, like, yeah, the recruiters that came through my high school, like, I mean, I didn't show them any respect at all, right? Like, I mean, I remember, this is I graduated in '94, and we had the Marines, like some Marines come through and they had their whites on and they're walking around, and me and my, knucklehead friends are are telling them like, hey man, I saw a few good men, and I can't handle the truth, and giving them a hard time and stuff like that, and we weren't respectful at all. We're like, no, get out of here. Um, so that didn't work for me, right? Like to see the guys walking around in their dress whites, and hey, you want to be a Marine? Oh, get out of here, man. Like, so everybody has like a different motivation. Like for me, it came to the point where I was like, hey, I figured out what I wanted to do, and I figured out that, oh, I can get an opportunity to do that thing, right? So some of the ways we've tried to do that, from the public affairs aspect, is some of these calls and services, right? Like kind of try to put people out there and show like, hey, there are all these various opportunities, to get experience, to get training, to get, just uh, kind of get a foundation that's going to help you step off, post military, right? That you can use, um, later on, and oh, you're going to be a part of a team, right? And I think like that's the thing. Like even if you don't look at the big team USA, it's thinking about like, hey, do you want to be a part of a group that works together towards a mission, right? And feeling that team environment, and uh, there's because the social aspect of it, right? I mean, how do we express that? I think that would be a good way too. Is that you got a lot of people out there who isolate themselves, online or wherever. They don't have a true human, experience like you would get in the military. I mean, there's no other experience you get, like especially like in the army, and probably in like the other services as well. Where if you're on a field problem or whatever for weeks at a time, and you're just living, sleeping, eating with other people in the way that you do in the military, there's nothing that comes close to that, um, outside in the civilian world. And then there's an aspect to it, like later on, where you have that, and then there's where you almost have like a 9 to 5. I mean, where it really, in some ways, feels that way, right? Like when you're in garrison and you're doing your thing, especially from pogue careers like mine, where come in and I'm doing whatever I got to do in the day. I go maybe to the maintenance do some maintenance, come back. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go get an assignment, go on a story, come back, write my article, check in with my boss, and 5 o'clock I'm done. Right? It's like almost like a 9 to 5. And then so I mean, it's not like yeah. So I think it's like kind of like exposing people to the fact that it's more than just you're not going to be an NTC for the rest of your life, right? And there's other aspects to the military that I don't think the civilian really comprehends or understands, right? You get an opportunity to fly around in a helicopter, but unless you're in the aviation unit, you're not doing that every day, right? It's cool and you get the chance to do it, right? But that's not what I'm doing every day. So kind of like exposing people to just the normal day-to-day life of what it is, like so. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. You know, now that I'm in, um, I have now several relative, like younger relatives now who have entered the service. So that's another weird phenomenon that that we've seen with the all volunteer forces. How much of it is become like this kind of family thing, right? And I think that part of that goes back to what I was saying is that those relatives and those people around, they're actually exposed to like, oh, my uncle or my cousin or whoever, he's just a regular person, right? And he goes and does this cool thing and he's been successful at it. And they've been able to observe that in the reality of what the military is, as opposed to someone from the outside who has misconceptions or maybe is being sold something different or sees it in a negative way. The family members kind of see it and go, oh, they've got to do these cool things. I've seen my uncle jump out of planes. He's been successful. He has got a family, and he's. I'm not struggling financially. I'm doing okay. And so they see all those things, right? And so I think that has a positive impact, right? Like, oh, this is a viable option for me, and it's not gonna, like I said, it's not gonna break me, and I'm not gonna end up, because I think that's the other thing is like people just saw it as like, oh, you're gonna get blown up, or you're fodder for the man kind of thing, and that's not
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's so many things to the side that again, I think one of the biggest emphasis we can make is that it carries after you're done. Of course, do 20 years is what everyone we try to push as many people towards a career as possible, but there's also a chance you can do your 6 years and then move on to something
Yeah.
after. I think
Um,
emphasizing that is smart.
yeah,
Um,
I would. It's kind of funny. Like, so my unit, the 49th pad, that initial 8 that I was there in 2001, all of us stayed in until after 20. And then I stayed in that unit for 5 years. So I went from E3 up to the NCOIC, and I went on. So from 2001 to 2006, and I took the unit back to Iraq on a deployment, and as the NCOIC. But that group that I took, all of those guys got out before 20. Um, and they all went on to successful careers, right? So these were all like the post 9/11 guys, and they all did either an enlistment or 2 enlistments, and then got out and went on to have successful careers in different things. One became a police officer, one got out, got his degree, got a master's, and then went up to New York City, and he's like a teacher in New York City, and does stuff of that. I mean, they're all been successful. I've got 2 others that went into the GS side and doing what they were doing, doing public affairs, but on the GS side, and yeah, I mean, they've all been very successful post post military. And then there's us, we that first group, and we all stayed in. Pretty interesting. We 4. So my NCOIC was the E6 at the time. He went on to become an E9, and then the 3 like privates that were in the unit, we all became E9. We all stayed in 20 years and became public affairs sergeants major. And then we had two E5s, and they both became E8s and retired. So pretty successful group. Uh, you know, it was a great group to start off with. I mean, like, I got lucky. I was fortunate where I was and had this team that was just all stars, and built it around. But yeah, going back to that, I mean, it's showing that yeah, you can do 20, or it's going to set you up, and you get out and you're successful. So
Right. Right. No, that's great. That's a great point. Well, as we wrap up here, let me just, I guess, last question. Any, I guess, last little bits of information that you'd like to share? I know you run that you had that other podcast going on with the SOCOM guys. You want to talk about that a little bit as we wrap up?
so our podcast is Softcast. It's been on hiatus for a little bit here now. We ran out, our contract ran out, and so we've been trying to get a new contract, and that's been a challenge. And so looks like we're finally getting close to getting a contract set up, and hoping that we're going to be able to um, hire on a host as well, and get it back and running. So right now it's not up, but we do have 60 plus episodes that are out there, and great conversations on that podcast. So Softcast, SOFCAST, look it up. It's on all the various platforms. But you're going to hear in that podcast, if you listen to it, you're going to hear everything from valor stories to stories of, like we talked about, those who've gotten out, who've overcome injuries or mental health issues, and gone on to serve in other ways. But kind of overcome those things, and they talk about how they do that, and what it took for them, and what that means. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. Just a variety of stories. There's some interesting episodes as well. We released an episode about a month. We released an episode the December before Russia invaded Ukraine. That episode we
Okay.
released in December was with a team leader, an assistant team leader from 10th Group, who had returned from Ukraine. And so they talked
Mhm.
about as much as they could, but it was kind of it was kind of weird that, like, we released this episode, and we recorded it like a few months before that, but then we ended up releasing it like December, and then February everything kicks off.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah, it was you're not going to hear those kind of interviews. And then we interviewed a psyop team uh, who also did a rotation, and was kind of seeing things in Ukraine, and from Eastern Europe, and so kind of
Right.
understanding like what was happening with a lot of the Russian um, information campaigns, and how they were helping Ukraine, with theirs, and seeing the success that they had in theirs. It's very interesting case studies to see in that. And those are kind of things that Softcast can bring. So hopefully,
Yeah.
we'll have it back up and running. We have our big industry, well, it's big conference we have that happens every May, and that will be the first week of May. Um, and so that starts up here, and I'm hoping that we're going to have our contract in place, and we'll do some lives, so you can tune in, and we'll usually with those we're able to interview some like commanders and things like that. So it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
yeah, just normal conversations. That whole podcast, it's interesting when you talk about public affairs and like what you can do, and we developed that. The whole premise of it was because it came out of the soft comprehensive review. So there was a look into soft culture, and what were those corrosives and things out there that some bad culture that had developed, and taking a look at that, and like how do we change that. And one of the main ways that they looked at was to kind of counter that, or at least repair the culture, was through a podcast. And so it was like, hey, how do we have real conversations about the challenges we're having within the community? how can we highlight positives, the positive aspects of our soft culture, and reinforce that through those conversations. And so that's really
Mm,
how Softcast came about, prior to my getting to the unit. But yeah,
okay.
it's great. It's been you doing it on your own. It's not easy. Like you said, we had to kind of outsource that, and
Yeah.
hire a team to come in and help us do it, because it's a
Yeah.
lot of effort. Like you said, having someone do the scheduling and do all that stuff, that's kind of like what me and a major, we would do. So we'd split our time. If she found someone, a guest to talk to, then she was the one doing all the scheduling, doing the pre-interview, doing all the setup, and getting the notes and everything ready for the host to be able to do the show. And vice versa. I would do that with, so we'd split that load. It wasn't all on one person, but that was definitely a lift. So if you're doing that on your own, it's not easy, right? To schedule it, get the
Sure.
time in, coordinate between the guest and the host and the time, and all of that. So, and then what you're going to talk about, it's a whole thing. So doing podcasts is definitely not an easy thing. And it's not an easy thing to maintain either. So you get the idea to, like, you're going to start it. Now you got to keep it going. So it's
It's
like,
tough.
okay, now I got to find new people. I got to talk to other people, and it just doesn't stop. Right. So
Yeah. Well, I've been, I mean, me personally, I've been fortunate. There's no shortage of great people to talk to. It's a matter of,
making
like you
time to
said,
talk to
getting
them
them.
all.
It's a matter of, figured out. Never mind. Listen to
Yeah.
with the soft one, so I'm hoping that it comes back. I'll definitely make sure that I share a few in the bio for this episode. So
Yeah.
hopefully some others can. I assume it's on all the platforms, right? Like
Yeah.
Spotify,
It,
everything
it,
like
it
that.
yeah, we're on all the platforms.
Okay.
We have it on our website as well. So
Nice.
yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, man, I'll definitely. I'll be sure to share those. And I feel like I feel like I would like to talk at some point when I have the emotional strength just to talk about early Afghanistan. I'd be very curious about. I feel like that could be a chat itself, just
Oh
talking
yeah.
about how that first deployment evolved over time. But
Yeah. And
yeah,
and
maybe we'll circle around.
yeah, we didn't even get to Iraq either. So I came back from
Yeah,
Afghanistan, and I was part of the initial invasion, as well. So
were you? Wow.
it was
Okay.
pretty-
Yeah. Hey, like I said, maybe we should just do
yeah,
both as a separate episode,
yeah.
and maybe even bring on some people who were
Well,
there
you
around the same time.
it'd be great talk to
Mm,
Mike Nelson. So he and I, we
okay.
we always share back and forth, because he was artillery captain at the time in the brigade, and
Okay.
I was the specialist, out there running with all the companies in the brigade. I got left behind, with my NCO, uh, with the brigade, and so we pretty much got sucked up into the brigade, and did PA
Gotcha.
for 325 for that rotation. And Mike Nelson, he and I became friends. We'd talk, and all the time. It was kind of cool. Like, all of a sudden, I remember I was following him on Twitter, and then I started a new account which used my name and everything. And all of a sudden, he was like,
Mhm.
"Hey, Sergeant Major," and I didn't know who he was, because I was like, I just saw, like,
Yeah.
his I didn't know, like, I'm like, "Oh crap, that's Colonel Nelson." I'm like, "Oh my god." Like, I didn't even realize I
Yeah.
was following you, sir. Like, this kind of small world online. But yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, count him as a friend now, and yeah, he'd be great.
Good.
Talk about that whole time with the brigade, and our time there. It was pretty cool.
Is Mike's also the one who said he was twice designated as a terrorist by the Iranian government, right? Is
Yeah,
that the same
yeah.
Mike
What did you say?
Nelson?
Called
Yeah.
two-time person of the year.
Yeah, two-time person of the year and then two-time Iranian designated terrorist.
Yeah,
I followed him for a while. We've interacted a little bit, but I'll,
yeah,
I'll definitely have to shoot him a message, see if he'd be open to chatting about both of those notes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the you see him on Fox News all the time now, Patrick Murphy. Um,
I don't watch a lot of Fox now, to be honest
Oh,
with you,
but
but
if you
I
watch
believe you.
Fox News, at any time, he's on Fox News all the time.
Oh, okay.
He was our brigade SJA. He was our brigade
Oh,
jack.
really?
Yeah, so I used to play ping pong with him all the time, and
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I don't know why I'm as an E4 I'm hanging out with officers, but
Yeah,
yeah, but it
you're
it is what
punch
it
above your weight.
is. But yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, so
Well, I'll
he was
be out.
yeah, it's kinda crazy. I don't know if you get him on, but yeah, he's been great for, like, doing veteran stuff, and he got out and became, one of the first congressmen for GWAT, veteran congressman out of Pennsylvania. So, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Hey, you never know.
you never know.
I'll try to hoodwink him. I'll frame it like, "Hey, I got a Fox interview. It's just me."
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
me in my office with a black screen up, but
yeah,
no, it's great. I really appreciate Sergeant Major. I know it's been a while to get to this point. Like I said, I would definitely like to circle around to talk about those two deployments. Again, so early in GWAT. Meanwhile, my time in GWAT was 10 years later. You know, it's just interesting to see how different it was and how the
yep,
mission changed over time. So
yeah,
we should definitely talk.
yep, and I guess a little bit of our time overlapped with CJTF OAR as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I spent a lot of time oh, you've probably seen a coin or two that I got from those guys.
yeah,
They were great. They were fantastic. They actually were a huge help for me because up to the point where before we were going to Syria, we were having a lot of trouble convincing everyone that we were going to Syria. Like we knew it was coming. We just could tell. And when we finally got put, I think we were put OpCon and AgCon to Sajodov. Um, it was a struggle, and then finally everything started coming together, and they backed us up immensely in Syria. So
yeah,
nothing but good things to say about those guys and gals, really.
it's cool.
So
All
yeah,
right.
small world, right?
It is a very small world. That's what you learn. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah, no, for sure. But all right, man. Well, I appreciate you again. I'll be in touch very soon, and
Yeah,
we'll circle around. Okay,
I'm always happy to talk. So,
great. All right, thanks,
all
Sergeant
right,
Major.
thank you.